Let's go Dolphins! The Miami Dolphins may have just received a piece of news that could quietly impact the future of the franchise, and the most surprising part is that it didn't happen inside the Dolphins organization at all. Instead, it came from the NFL. And if you're a Dolphins fan who has been paying attention to the quarterback conversation surrounding this team, what happened today deserves a lot more attention than it's getting. Because one of the most talked about quarterback storylines of the summer suddenly disappeared. Just like that. For weeks, there had been growing discussion surrounding Brennan Sorsby and the possibility of his path into the NFL through a supplemental draft. Many people believed he could become one of the biggest stories of the offseason. Many believed teams around the league would be interested. And some believed the Miami Dolphins could be one of those teams paying close attention. But then came the bombshell. The NFL informed teams that there would be no supplemental draft, no opportunity, no entry into the league this season. No surprise quarterback addition, at least not in 2026. And while fans around the league reacted with shock, I think Dolphins fans should be looking at this story from a completely different perspective, because this may actually help Miami more than it hurts. Before I explain why, make sure you've already smashed that like button if you're excited that training camp is finally getting close. And today I want to hear from the most optimistic Dolphins fans watching. Comment below. Go Dolphins! The future is still bright. Let's see how many Dolphins fans still believe this organization is moving in the right direction. Now, my opinion on this situation is simple. I understand why some fans are disappointed. Whenever a potentially talented quarterback becomes available, people naturally become curious. People start imagining possibilities. People start wondering whether their team should get involved. But I actually think the Dolphins may have benefited from the NFL's decision. And here's why. This decision removes uncertainty. It removes temptation. It removes the possibility of sacrificing future draft capital on a quarterback before Miami truly knows what it already has. Think about where the Dolphins currently are. They have Malik Willis. They have Quinn Ewers. They have an entire training camp ahead. They have preseason games ahead. And they still have a lot to learn about both quarterbacks. What if Miami had entered the supplemental draft? What if they had used valuable draft resources? What if they had made a move before fully evaluating the players already inside the building? Those are fair questions, and now they don't have to answer them, because the decision has effectively been made for everyone. What makes this even more interesting is the timing. The NFL reportedly based its decision on concerns surrounding the situation that led to Sorsby's attempt to enter the supplemental process. The league wanted more time and wasn't comfortable moving forward under the circumstances. Whether fans agree or disagree, the message from the NFL was crystal clear. They were not willing to take risks. And as a result, Sorsby's path to the league has been pushed back until the 2027 draft cycle. Now here's where the story becomes incredibly fascinating for Dolphins fans. Because if Sorsby eventually enters the 2027 draft, he won't be alone. Not even close. The discussion surrounding next year's quarterback class continues growing stronger. More names, more talent, more competition, more options for teams that might be looking for answers at the position. And that creates a very interesting situation for Miami. Because over the next several months, the Dolphins are going to learn a lot. They're going to learn about Malik Willis. They're going to learn about Quinn Ewers. They're going to learn whether either player can become a long-term solution. That's why I keep coming back to the same conclusion. Patience may end up being the biggest winner here. Instead of rushing into a decision. Instead of gambling on projections. Instead of spending future resources immediately. The Dolphins now have an opportunity to gather information. Real information. Information that could completely shape the future direction of the franchise. And trust me, Dolphins fans, the deeper you look at this situation, the more it feels like the Dolphins may have been handed something extremely valuable. Time. And in the NFL, time is one of the most valuable assets any organization can have. Because let's be honest, the quarterback position is still the biggest unanswered question surrounding this franchise. Not because there isn't optimism, not because there isn't talent, but because nobody truly knows yet what Malik Willis will become over a full season as the focal point of the offense. That's why I think this development changes the conversation. Before the NFL made its decision, there was always the possibility that teams could become aggressive. There was always the possibility that organizations would spend draft resources chasing potential. There was always the possibility that the Dolphins would have to decide whether Brennan Sorsby was worth the risk. Now, that decision no longer exists. And because it no longer exists, Miami can focus completely on the players already in the building. Malik Willis, Quinn Ewers, and every evaluation that comes with them. That's why training camp suddenly becomes even more important. Every throw matters. Every practice matters. Every preseason snap matters. Because the Dolphins now have a clear runway to evaluate exactly what they have without another quarterback storyline competing for attention. What's fascinating is that this could end up benefiting Malik Willis more than anyone else. Think about it. If Miami had pursued another quarterback option, every struggle would have created more noise. Every interception would have created more speculation. Every difficult practice would have created more debate. Instead, the focus remains exactly where the organization wants it, on Willis proving he can be the answer. And honestly, that's why I keep saying he remains the most important player on the roster. Because the future direction of the franchise may ultimately depend on what happens over the next several months. If Willis succeeds, everything changes. The quarterback conversation cools down. The organization gains clarity. The rebuild accelerates. The future becomes much easier to plan. But if he struggles, then the conversation surrounding the 2027 quarterback class becomes impossible to ignore. And that's where this story gets really interesting. Because according to the discussion, the 2027 class is expected to be loaded with quarterback talent. Multiple names. Multiple potential first-round prospects. Multiple options for teams that may be searching for answers. And now Brennan Sorsby becomes part of that conversation too. Instead of entering the league immediately, he'll have to wait. Instead of being evaluated in isolation, he'll be evaluated alongside an even deeper quarterback group. For Miami, that creates flexibility. For Miami, that creates options. For Miami, that creates leverage. Because if the Dolphins need a quarterback next year, they'll have more information and potentially more choices available than they would have had today. Another element that shouldn't be ignored is what this means for rival teams. The discussion specifically mentioned organizations that may have been aggressive in pursuing Sorsby if the supplemental draft had occurred. Now those teams lose that opportunity as well. And whenever division rivals lose a potential avenue for improving at quarterback, that's not exactly bad news from Miami's perspective. But while the quarterback discussion grabs headlines, there's another reason Dolphins fans should be excited. Training camp is almost here. The waiting is nearly over. The league has officially announced the reporting dates. Rookies are set to report on July 21st. Veterans follow on July 28th. That means the speculation phase of the offseason is quickly coming to an end. Soon we'll stop talking about possibilities. We'll start talking about performance. We'll start talking about chemistry. We'll start talking about players earning jobs. And honestly, that's where the real excitement begins. Because no matter how many quarterback debates happen during the offseason, eventually the players have to take the field and prove it. Malik Willis has that opportunity. Quinn Ewers has that opportunity. And the Dolphins have an opportunity to finally gather the answers they've been searching for. That's why I believe the NFL's decision may end up helping Miami more than hurting them. Not because Brennan Sorsby lacks talent. Not because the Dolphins wouldn't have had interest. But because patience gives Miami